Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the Corrupt Clearfield podcast. It's been a while. I'm your host, Gabriel Harbour, and in this episode, we are actually going to take a look back over the last 15 episodes, at least in a small part, because two documents have came to light since I concluded those episodes a year and a half ago, and they do provide some additional context, and I think a few more pieces of damning evidential testimony on behalf of Tara, as well as some indications that the district attorney's office and the police force were, in fact, in some sort of collusion with her. So, before we move forward and look at what I've been doing over the last 18 months, or at least a portion of it in the next 5 episodes, this episode in particular, we're going to tie some things together based on this new information. And as always, remember, if you want to check out the documents I'm referencing or reading from in these podcasts, you can click on the Dropbox link in the description below. Should be there whether you're listening to podcasts on iTunes or Google Play, listening on YouTube, or if you're at corruptclearfield.com. All of those should have the links to the Dropbox files, if you are so inclined, available for you to use. The first document is one that I'm not actually going to read from because it's not particularly important in terms of any one specific piece of information, but it does further help to paint the picture of exactly how overwhelmed John was by the system during this entire ordeal. It's the hearing de novo from 11/5/14, where the original PFA was extended out an additional year from 9/15/14 until 9/15/15. So, like I said, not anything in particular that is overly damning or I think worthy of being read aloud here. But I would recommend all of you who have been following along, who are interested in such things, to go ahead and read this transcript because it pretty much shows how he was basically dead in the water from day one. There was really no hope at the beginning. So, any defense that he might have, at the beginning made some critical errors that sort of snowballed and then ended up with him not having any chance at all later on down the road, I just don't think that's accurate. You can tell that essentially the system was out against him since day one. And I don't generally like to make calls like that without, evidence that is proof positive. But I think that the preponderance of evidence, to use a term that the PFA courts are so fond of, is absolutely undeniable. The next document is one that I am going to read from because I think there is some very interesting information here, including a few instances of perjury by Tara and some very, we'll say at the very least, discrediting questioning by Assistant District Attorney Baker. This document is the transcript from the jury trial that John had on 7/8/16. I managed to scrape together the funds and got a copy of it. FYI, it is not cheap for some reason to get transcripts from jury trials, even though that information should be available to the public and provided as a public service. Just my opinion. We're going to start on page 28. And just to refresh all of your memories, if you're coming into this cold, having listened to these episodes a year and a half ago, and you haven't thought about it much since, the main crux of this case was the fact that Tara, who in her attempts to get a second and critical violation, PFA violation against John, had contacted the Lawrence Township Police Department on August 16th, 2015, claiming that both on that day there was an incident at the church, which go back and listen to the previous episodes if you want to, get the exact contextual details of all that once again. But there was the incident at the church and then the incident in the alleyway outside of her house that had happened in the past. And so, to be exact, actually August 3rd. So these were two incidents within 2 weeks of one another that she called Lawrence Township Police Department about to complain about. And the Officer Curry, who came out, told her that, hey, Tara, these don't really constitute a PFA violation. Tara carried on a little bit more, and finally Officer Curry said, okay, I'll take it to the district attorney's office and we will see what they say. So you have that occurring, Officer Curry writing up a report, choosing not to charge John with a PFA violation and saying she'll go to the DA's office. Then we have, curiously enough, a little over 10 days later, so 13 days later, Tara going into the Clearfield Borough Police Department. Remember, Clearfield Borough Police Department versus Lawrence Township Police Department, different, very close to one another, but separate entities. So Tara goes into the Clearfield County Police Department and reports to Officer Podleski that John had liked one of her posts on Facebook, and she also reports those original two incidents that one occurring on the 16th of August, one occurring on the 3rd, that she had reported to Officer Curry on the 16th. So she came with the trifecta to report to Officer Podleski on the 29th. And then it wasn't until 2 days later, the 31st, that she actually presented the evidence to Officer Podleski. I say evidence in quotation marks because we all know, and as I have pointed out and proven in previous episodes, the evidence was actually created by Tara herself and false. But in any case, she points out the evidence to Officer Podleski on this date, on the 31st of August, and this leads to Officer Podlisky summarily arresting John, taking him into custody, charging him with 2 criminal counts and 1 civil count of a PFA violation. Now, this is where the discrepancy occurred, as I explained in a previous episode. In Tara's own written testimony that was included in the discovery for the jury trial, she wrote that on August 28th, so one day before she initially went to Officer Podlisky, that she had been advised by Officer Curry from Lawrence Township to contact Officer Podlisky with the Clearfield Borough Police Department specifically. So we have Officer Curry on the 16th telling Tara, no violation, but I'll check with the DA's office and see what they have to say. We have on the 28th, Tara giving a sworn testimony or a sworn affidavit or whatever they're called, and claiming that Officer Curry had got back to her and told her to contact Officer Podlisky specifically. Then we have Officer Podlisky on the 31st, after Tara finally brings the evidence after making the report, going out to John's house to arrest him. So the question I have is, who in the district attorney's office advised Officer Curry or Tara, it could be one or the other, I still hold out some possibility that Officer Curry may have her hands clean in all of this, but who was it in the district attorney's office that advised Tara specifically, hey, go to Officer Podlisky? Now, I went through all that and I understand that it was a little long-winded, but there was a reason for it, and here's why. On page 28, Assistant District Attorney Baker, who is attorney for the Commonwealth, which is Tara in this case, says, you testified he was driving away from the church. She says yes. He says, and you were driving towards the church. She says yes. Then he says, I want to jump forward a little bit more. At some point, did you speak with the Clearfield police about these encounters with the defendant? Tara says, yes, I did. Baker says, who did you speak with at the Clearfield police? Tara says, on August 16th, remember that date, August 16th, right after services, I immediately drove to the Lawrence Township Police Building. And then there's those 2 little hyphens that indicate somebody's being cut off by someone else. Assistant District Attorney Baker actually cuts her off mid-sentence and says, Clearfield Borough, not Lawrence Township, but Clearfield Borough. The man says that specifically because remember, that's who actually Tara made the original complaint to. She called Lawrence Township Police Department. But here it is, revisionist history. In the midst of the trial, they're attempting to change the order of operations so that Tara's major folly is covered. She says, Clearfield Borough, I spoke with Officer Podlisky. Assistant District Attorney Baker says, do you remember when you first spoke with him? She says, it was within days of the August 16th event. Well, first, no, it wasn't. According to all the official documents, it was 13 days afterwards. And second of all, you wrote yourself that it wasn't until August 28th that you were advised to actually speak to Officer Podlisky with the Clearfield Borough Police Department in the first place. Why would you have been advised to speak with Officer Podlisky at the Clearfield Borough Police Department by Lawrence Township Police Department if you hadn't actually went to Lawrence Township Police on August 16th as opposed to the Clearfield Borough Police Department? Because the Clearfield Borough wouldn't be recommending you talk to themselves. That simply doesn't make any sense. There's one instance right there where when you have too many lies, it just becomes impossible to keep track of them all. Pages 31 and pages 77 through 78 have Tara claiming that the marital property in question, the property that John was trying to get back, because remember, all of his possessions had been taken from the house while he was left watching because he wasn't allowed to go anywhere near her because of the PFA violation, the restraining order. She says that he had absolutely no interest in those items. They had nothing to do with him. They weren't marital property. And they can all provably be shown to be items that John owned before he married Tara. They were marital property. Now, you can say they should have been divvied up 50-50. Fine. You can say they should have had to arbitrate this in front of a hearing officer. Fine. But absolutely, unconditionally, under no circumstance could it be claimed that he had absolutely no interest in any of these items. That's simply not true. It's demonstrably false, and it's another instance of perjury. 2 more, to be exact. Now, pages 69 and pages 69 and 70 are interesting because it shows that Judge Cherry would not actually allow Billy Jack to testify. John says next witness would be Billy Jack. Mr. Baker says, again, I ask for an offer of proof. An offer of proof basically being you go up to the judge's table and you talk with both lawyers. Both lawyers talk and explain exactly why they're calling this witness to make sure they're not going to say anything off the wall that would violate what the direction of the courtroom that the judge has given is. The court says, go ahead. Mr. Baker says, may we approach, Your Honor? And Judge Cherry says, all right, come forward, Mr. Bell and Mr. Gill, come forward, please. Off the record discussion was held at the sidebar, it says in parentheses. And then Judge Cherry says, based upon the representation made to the court at the sidebar, this witness will be precluded from testifying as to the offer that was made to the Commonwealth. Now, if we skip backwards just a little bit, pages 65 through 69 show that Assistant District Attorney Baker and Judge Cherry conspired to not allow John to establish an alibi for the day in question, that Tara claimed he was outside her apartment in the alleyway. He could have proved he was at his lawyer's, Attorney Cooper's, office on that day because that's where he was. And he actually called my father-in-law, Ed Brady, to the stand to testify. An offer of proof was asked for. Ed Brady was actually allowed to testify, but they cut him off in the middle and took him off the stand. You can read about that in pages 65 through 69. I won't read all the exact text and go through all that, but bottom line is they wouldn't allow him to take the stand and actually claim that, no, I drove John to his Attorney Cooper's office on that day, so there was no way he could have been outside Tara's house on the day she was claiming. Now, if you'll hearken back to the motion in limine that Assistant District Attorney Baker filed prior to the jury trial, you'll understand why they cut John off and they cut Ed off so that Ed and Billy Jack were unallowed to testify. And it was because the motion in limine said that John was not allowed to provide an alibi defense, even though a pro se litigant, which is what John was after his attorney, Attorney Cooper, had filed a motion to withdraw his counsel and it had been granted. He was a pro se litigant. They're supposed to be given enormous amounts of leeway by the court, especially in situations where the defendant is incarcerated while trying to perform their own pro se defense. But throw all the rules out in Clearfield County. The last aspect of this transcript that I'm going to point you to, and again, I'm not going to read it because it's quite a few pages. Pages 82 through 87 show that John was absolutely bullied into submission by Assistant District Attorney Baker. A number of the assertions that are made by Assistant District Attorney Baker are hearsay and leading. They are not actually relevant to what's going on, and they're trying to put words in John's mouth and basically force him to admit to things that characterizations of him that are frankly false. So again, I'm not going to read it. I think that you should absolutely read it, and I think this document is pivotal. It doesn't prove anything that we didn't already have evidence of, so it's not like it's a groundbreaker, but I just thought it was interesting to bring this document to light and to let all of you folks know about it. The final thing here, and then we will exit stage after this, is that Judge Cherry did in fact dismiss the jury before rendering his guilty verdict on the summary violation. So if you'll remember, the summary violation was the harassment charge, and the violation that the jury was deliberating on was the stalking charge. The jury said, nope, John's not guilty. There's not enough evidence. Something's fishy here. They unanimously found him not guilty. Then Judge Cherry thanked them, dismissed them all from the courtroom, and then somehow still ruled John guilty of harassment, even though it was the exact same description of charges that he had just been ruled non-guilty on by the jury. Thanks for listening to the Corrupt Clearfield podcast. If you have information regarding the matters discussed during this podcast episode, or if you would like to share your story, please contact me at my new email address, crazygaby, that's G-A-B as in Bravo, E-Y, at protonmail.ch. Again, that's crazygaby at protonmail.ch. For updates as this investigation progresses, follow me on Twitter or Gab at crazygaby, or subscribe to my YouTube channel by typing crazygaby in the search bar. Lastly, please consider donating to the cause via PayPal or Bitcoin. The PayPal address is paypal.me/crazygaby, or you can visit corruptclearfield.com and click on the Support Us tab located on the left-hand side of the screen on desktop, or the drop-down menu on the mobile website. The PayPal link and Bitcoin addresses are both listed there.